they'll discuss the possibility of meeting in person, and then postponed several times due to like fake emergencies, or like some sort of desperate situation that they'll describe. Like they'll say, oh, I'm in the hospital, or a close loved one passed away. Usually this like emergency scenario is made up in order to manipulate the victim to send money or to like help cover the emergency.
All right,
But yeah.
welcome back to the podcast. I am joined today with Annabel Kuhn. She is a psychiatry resident at Harvard South Shore. We will be talking about online dating scams and catfish stories today. I thought this would be an important topic because I've had a lot of patients that come in with these issues. Some more serious than others, some being scammed out of hundreds of thousands of dollars, some just in these long-term romantic relationships with people that do not exist in real life and unaware until we probe into it further. So I thought this would be a good topic to go through. And so Annabelle has done some digging. So welcome to the podcast, Annabelle.
Thank you. Great to be back. I think that a lot of my research relies on my guilty pleasure, which is really bad reality TV shows. So happy to incorporate this in. But yeah, I also have had at least one patient who like has been dealing with some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, and it really impacts people's lives. So I think it's really important to talk about.
Yeah, and it's actually more common than I realized in like looking up like there was this one study, it was like they interviewed so many people and like a bunch of them had actually catfished other people or been catfished. So I think it's more common than people realize, and I think it's going to be much more common as like deep fakes with AI get generated, or just like if you look at like all of the filters that are available on TikTok and
Yeah, even
different.
on Zoom here, I was like looking at if you like click the three dots in the upper right, there's like choose video filter. And like it looks like most of them are kind of silly, but who knows?
Oh,
Did you
yeah,
see that?
absolutely. No, there was
Yeah.
like so yeah, I mean, it seems like every video streaming app is kind of developing like this artificial makeup generator or make you look make your skin look better, stuff like that,
Yeah.
you know. So,
Yes.
okay, so why don't you start with the definition of what it means to
Yeah,
catfish someone?
absolutely. So the Merriam-Webster dictionary actually defines the word catfish as a person who sets up a false personal profile on a social networking site for fraudulent or deceptive purposes. And David, you were just saying that you think there's like a different pop culture definition.
Yeah, like if you look up catfish on TikTok, you'll see video after video of people doing makeup before and after, and it's it's some of the most like interesting viral content because you see these people like in their process of putting on the makeup and they look so different when they finish than when they start, right? And
Yeah.
it's also you can see this for guys as well, you know, like they'll put their height as like 6'2" where they're really like 5'8", you know, and they'll wear
Yeah. Oh
like
yeah.
these like shoes that make them look deceptively tall when like they're not really tall. I don't know
Right,
if you've
right.
seen those. So
Yeah.
it's different for different genders.
Yeah, I think there's like different like beauty standards and like standards of what's considered attractive in today's society. And so people want to like maybe pretend that there's something they're not, or seem more attractive to potential suitors or even just like to their followers.
Right. So there's
Yeah.
like there's the subtle catfish, like I'm just going to enhance myself or change slight details. And then there's more of like the, you know, complete catfish where you're pretending to be someone you're completely not. You're using someone's pictures that are not your own. And why don't we go through some of the some of the most salacious catfish stories, just to give some examples of these that we could find.
Yeah. So I think my favorite, I don't know if it's my favorite, but the most um fascinating and I guess frankly hilarious episode of Catfish, and I feel bad for the guy, but um there's this guy named Antoine, and he thought he was in a 3-year relationship with a man named Tony, and it turned out to be his cousin, Carmen, the whole time. And when Carmen was confronted about this, she infamously stated, "You shouldn't have called me a fat ass Kelly Price," and revealed that her 3-year trick was an act of revenge. I guess Antoine had called her a fat ass Kelly Price 3 years prior, and she sought revenge in a very cruel way.
Yeah, so if it's like a pretty impressive YouTube clip, we'll link it on our scholarly blog that we'll write on our website, which has lots of citations. There's actually been a lot of studies on catfishing. We'll get into those. But interestingly about this story is it's like a revenge catfish, right? It's revealed in the most kind of like interesting way. They're driving around looking for the real person, and then it and I don't think the TV crew knew about the catfish either, which was really interesting. Like, so
Right.
the TV group who was filming this, they were totally thrown off when they found out that Carmen was catfishing Antoine. So,
Yeah. The catfish was in the car the whole time.
right.
It's unbelievable.
Okay.
All
Number two, I like the graphic that you
right.
generated here.
Thank you. Yes,
Um,
I thought it might help to help people understand what's going on here because there's a lot of moving parts.
Here it is. Okay, so let's go to the Birdman catfish.
Sure. Oh my gosh, this one is so um complicated. Let me pull up.
So this one literally
Oh, I
it's
guess I
like,
didn't. Yeah. Sorry, I guess I didn't write down the like what I was gonna say, but I can talk it out.
yeah, talk it out.
Um, yeah, so this one is so convoluted. Basically, there was this woman named Shelley Chartier who lives in Canada, and she essentially pretended to be two people and catfished the real person of the persona she was trying to create. One of these people was like an NBA player, Chris Anderson, otherwise known as Birdman. And so there was this like aspiring model named Paris Dunn, who she also pretended to be in order to talk to the real Chris Birdman Anderson. And then she pretended to be Birdman and then spoke to the real Paris Dunn. And the most bizarre part is that the real people met in person and did not know that they hadn't actually been talking to one another.
Right. So she basically facilitates like every time that Paris Dunn thinks that she's texting the Birdman, she's really texting Shelley, who then
Mhm.
takes that text and translates it to the Birdman and vice versa. And so it's like she's this in between, and she's, I think, twisting the stories a little bit, especially
Yeah.
of Paris Dunn, because Paris Dunn was underage. And so Birdman
Yeah.
never knew that she was underage because she had hid that piece from the story. And then, so when it comes out that, there was this relationship with the real Paris Dunn and Birdman, Birdman gets thrown into this legal gauntlet of hell where, he gets accused of, well, underage sex and, all this stuff. And then through that investigation, it comes out the real character of Shelley was behind it all and facilitating this whole thing.
Right. She actually, I think, like served time in prison for this.
Yeah, and interestingly, she just seemed like she was a super lonely, kind of isolated person in
Yeah.
the middle of Canada without a lot of human connection. When they like
Right.
interviewed her, it seemed like she was just very, very lonely. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
and like almost bored.
Yeah.
And it,
Bored and lonely. Yeah.
yeah, it kind of seemed like she did this just for fun.
Yeah. So, okay, let's go to the third one.
The third one, so there was this new Netflix documentary about Manti Te'o that was just released in August. Um, and for those who don't know, he was the star of the Notre Dame football team, and he was dating a woman named Lene, who was a student at Stanford. And so their relationship was long distance because he was in Indiana, she was in California. And so Lene told Manti that she was diagnosed with leukemia, but made Manti promise that he would continue playing football no matter what. And um, she like she passed away from leukemia. And Manti Te'o continued playing football, and this was seen as like an inspiration to fans and to other people who weren't even like into football. They thought this story was incredible. But then as it turned out, Manti Te'o never actually met this person in person. And it turned out that Lene was not even a real person. It was another person, catfishing, using someone else's pictures, pretending to be some imaginary person named Lene. Um, and so, this caused a big scandal for Manti Te'o, and really I don't think he could really clear his name of this. And it was really tragic because well, the other thing was that it turned out that the catfisher like may or may not have been Manti Te'o's family friend. And so that kind of came up and was like, oh, was he in on it for like attention? So it's very complicated, and it's really tragic too.
Yeah, and imagine, you know, I mean, I imagine he didn't know about it, and he thought he was really playing football in memory of this girl that he loved and who died. I mean, you could fall in love with someone that you imagine and you meet online
Right.
and you have conversations with, and
Yeah.
so
Did you see the documentary?
no, I didn't. But go ahead.
Oh, it's
Did
very
you?
good. Yeah, I would imagine that he didn't know either. He seems like a very honest guy, just wanted to do football and do well in his career and life.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me about like the victim. Like, what is the common victim of a catfish?
Sure. So victims are commonly lonely, um, or inexperienced in love. Maybe they have features on the autism spectrum. They have high trait agreeableness, and like maybe in the case for Manti Te'o or maybe even Birdman, maybe there's a limited time for what would be a typical face-to-face relationship.
Yeah, and so a lot of the victims I see are more average looking guys who are on these dating apps who, unfortunately, some of them will never match to a normal person or like very rarely match to a normal person.
Or like
And,
an average looking person,
or no, like
or like an average, yeah.
sometimes they just don't match to normal people.
What do you
They,
mean normal?
normal as in not catfish people.
Oh,
Like
like a real person.
there's something about their profile maybe, and sometimes when I look at their profiles, it's like, you know, it's like they don't really know how to put out a profile that would match a normal person, and so they become like
Mm.
more commonly a victim to this sort of catfish thing. Sometimes they're often, yeah, lonely, inexperienced, and naive. And one of the patients I had was super high trait agreeableness, where like even after it was exposed that this guy was a Nigerian man who was very different than the actual person that was the profile. It's like she still remained like in connection. I call it the second level of the catfish, and the
Mm.
con is to reveal that your true personhood, and the person still wants to be in relationship to you.
Wow. Do you
So
think
it's
that's because they like just still want it to be true, like the original fantasy, or they're
it's
into a
almost like
different idea?
the realness. It's like they're super lonely, and the real person. Um, I think knowing the real story almost creates a level of connection that seems more even. And I think there's something of a trauma bond that gets created in that twist. Um, we could talk more about this as we go on. So yeah, and then I think interestingly, as we talk about those three stories, like one, yeah, it's a vengeful act, but often it's kind of like this socially anxious, bored person who, you know, is trying to have a relationship, but maybe has reasons why they can't have normal relationships, and they're like trying to connect with other human beings in some way.
Yeah.
But I think the people who are trying to make money and trying to swindle people, they more embody the dark triad, narcissism, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and, or they work for someone who embodies the dark triad. So, nowadays, it's common to have like a little catfish farm where you'll have a group of like 20 or 30 people working in this room every day like a normal job, and their sole goal is to do these catfish relationships overseas. I've seen a number of videos where they're exposing them, where they get into the computers, the security computers, and you can see this like group of 30 people, and they're like working, like
Oh my
all of them
gosh.
doing catfish type stuff. So kind of like a call center.
Wow. That is quite scary to think about.
So tell me about this study that was published in August 2022. What did
Sure.
they find about the perpetrators and the targets?
Yeah, so this study was kind of interesting. There was a table that kind of had different data than what they discussed in the abstract, but they surveyed people who like had been catfish targets or perpetrators and explored demographic characteristics. And at least based on the table that was published, 15% of targets were men, 85% of targets were women. And of the perpetrators, 26% were men and 74% were women. The mean age for both perpetrator and target was around 24. Again, this is just of the people that they interviewed. And um, yeah, and of the people that they interviewed, I guess, yeah, of the people that they interviewed, 54% of the targets were Hispanic or Latin, um, and 43% of the perpetrators were Hispanic or Latin. And it just kind of goes down the list. On either side, most of the people interviewed were heterosexual or described themselves that way. Interestingly, most of them had like at least some college, if not a bachelor's or graduate degree. And it looks like 58% of the perpetrators were students and 61% of the victims were students. So, yeah, there was also like a slight propensity for people reporting that they're slightly religious on both sides. 40% of the perpetrators, 50% of the targets. Um, so that is
And the
what this
majority did
table
not have
says.
children. Like 85% of the perpetrators didn't have children, 80% of
Yeah,
the targets.
yeah. I
Um,
wonder if I wonder what like exactly like their target audience was, or like how they got
People. Yeah.
these people in their study, but it's a different
Yeah. It's
discussion.
the the most interesting thing about this study to me was that the abstract was so different than the table.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how did that even get through a peer review board? Okay, let's keep moving.
Anyway,
Um,
um,
So what is an online romance scam?
So, okay. Criminals can initiate a fake romantic relationship with a victim online, and it's from a perpetrator's perspective, it's almost easy because dating websites often promote a match between two individuals, and um, with this rise in online romance scams, one of these people may have like nefarious motifs. So the scammer can create a fake profile on a social media site, dating app, use stolen photographs, usually of someone like conventionally attractive. And in this fake online relationship, the scammer grooms their victim and develops a highly personal and intimate relationship until they feel that the victim might be willing to send the scammer money. Um, and there's a couple studies which describe internet fraud as a staged process with three different stages. The first being plausibility, so like the grooming process, and two, interaction with a fraudster, and finally three, losing money to the fraud.
Yeah. And I don't know, do you want to say any more about like stage one? Like what is plausibility or what does that entail?
Yeah, I think that it's hard to say. I feel like in so many catfish episodes I've watched, people are always like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this really attractive person is talking to me." But they seem to kind of go with it and think, "Yeah, like, well, why not? I have a lot going for me," and sometimes that's true. And so it's just kind of like it seems like many of the people don't really question, like, wow, this person looks like an absolute model. I've never seen this person in my town. And they never really like question it further than that.
Hmm. Right.
So maybe it's related to the high trade agreeableness of the targets.
Yeah. Or just, yeah, the loneliness,
Yeah. Yeah.
like just and, the hopefulness.
Yes.
Like I hope that this could be true. Finally, someone who seems to care, who's listening. There's a series on TikTok called Catfishing the Catfish, and there's this guy that kind of pretends to, you know, be a victim in these catfish things. And he'll send like a picture of himself early on, and it's like the ugliest picture he can possibly create. It's like triple chin, like making a goofy smile. And the catfisher will be like, "Oh, you're so handsome." And then, the girl will send like a picture of herself, and it's like absolute gorgeous person, right? Like,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh, I don't think I look very good, but here it is." And so
Yeah.
there's kind of this like pattern that you can start to see of, oh, you're so different, you're so kind. If you're older, it's like, wow, I'm looking for a more mature man. If you're younger, it's like, oh, I want someone I can have, you know, that's young and full of energy. So it's kind of like whoever you are, they like that, right? They appreciate that, and you feel respected and appreciated, and also there's a like it seems like the responses that come are not right away. Like they'll wait a day or 45 minutes until the second response. So it's like the responses are sort of leaked out slowly, right? Like
Mhm.
where it's kind of like there's this anticipation of reward type of thing. Like, oh, is this
Oh,
person going to keep
really?
talking to me? Like, so,
I was
right.
kind of thinking maybe it's the opposite because like maybe for like non-catfishers, like it takes a while to respond, and but like for like the scammers, like they want to
They want to move things
like
along.
get the money faster, but maybe they're smarter than I realize.
Some want to move towards money right away, and some
Mm-hmm.
try to build the connection first and do like the long
Mm-hmm.
game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like sometimes they try to elicit a little bit of money, like, oh, let's do a meetup, if they're in the same country, like, hey, pay for my gas to come visit you, and it's like you're not going to
Mhm.
see that gas money ever again, buddy.
Oh no,
Um,
we're that person.
but it's actually quite common. Like I've had a number of people tell me that same story, like, oh, she wanted me to pay for her gas, and then you know I paid for her gas and I never saw her, and then I've seen that again, and I'm like, that's not a real person.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's rough. Um, okay, let's keep going. So the scammer will declare their love for the victim within weeks, right? Which is kind of unique.
Yeah, a little fast from what I would think is within like normal limits, but that kind of like further like perpetuates this like fantasy of oh my gosh, this person is so in love with me so fast. This must be like a real thing. And then yeah, like we were talking about, like they'll discuss the possibility of meeting in person, and then postponed several times due to like fake emergencies, or like some sort of desperate situation that they'll describe. Like they'll say, oh, I'm in the hospital, or a close loved one passed away. um, Usually this like emergency scenario is made up in order to manipulate the victim to send money or to like help cover the emergency. um, and so like before like getting to that point, sometimes the scammer might test the water, so to speak, and ask the victim for small gifts to see if they may be more willing to send something more expensive later down the road.
Yeah. Any commonalities in how they want the money sent that you saw?
It's usually like a wire transfer, or maybe like through gift cards
Yep. Yep.
or something like this. And a lot of times people say, oh, like the person they wanted me to send the money to like wasn't under their name because they didn't have an ID, or something like this. Like the scammer tells them that, yeah, I don't have like an ID, so you have to send it to my neighbor. So it's a totally different name than what the target was under the impression that the catfisher's name was.
Yeah. I'm thinking I actually got almost catfished
Really?
there was this crypto guru that I've been following, and I posted a comment on one of his Instagram posts, and like within like half an hour, he sent me a message on the, you know, he sent me a DM, and he was like,
Mhm.
"Hey man, saw your post. Like, how you doing? Like, what kind of things you investing in?" Just started a conversation, and then after a little bit, I was like, "Huh, I thought I had sent him a message before, and like, why isn't that up top?" You know?
Ah,
And so I I looked, and the name was subtly different, and this fake person had 100,000 followers. So they had done some like bot thing to get fake followers, and they were just reposting all of the videos of this person.
oh my gosh.
And so, you know, it's kind of a crypto catfish or whatever, like investment catfish. And I'm sure they would have wanted to invest my money with their like group or whatever, or tried to get some my crypto sent to them or something like that, or but it's just like, yeah, fake scammers, right?
Fake scammers are all around us. I'm glad you realized it was a fake.
Oh man. Okay. One thought that came to my mind when we're talking about this,
Yeah.
like how this works, was this guy Andrew Tate. I sent you this
Yes.
some of his videos, and so this guy was, I would consider, like the top catfish of our modern era, and I think a lot of people, like he told this story and of how he got into this. He had like two girlfriends or more than two girlfriends, and he called them all together, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna set up this like intricate catfish ring, and I want you to be a part of it." Four of them left, and two remained, and so he, like, from Romania, was having these girls basically try to get guys to fall in love with them and send money. And he found out that it was actually better for him to do all of the communication with the guys. So he would have the girls just on these like video chats with the guys while he was typing. And
Interesting.
he created these kind of like ideal scenarios for men, but he was the one catfishing the guys, right? So the girls video, like they were really talking to a real girl, but he was doing all the typing. And then throughout the day, he would continue communicating with these guys. And he went for being absolutely broke. Him and his brother were like absolutely broke to like being multimillionaires from doing this. They said that the most they pulled out of one guy was like $1 million. Interestingly, he's telling this story and he's kind of bragging about it. But I kind of like, I'm like, this is like incredibly manipulative,
Yeah.
immoral. So I consider him like the biggest catfish of all time,
I
or the
think
most
he's like
successful
the biggest
catfish.
super villain of all time. It sounds like he's done a lot of questionable things.
Well, that is one thing that he for sure did, and he for
Yeah.
sure made that. I think that's how he made his first millions of dollars,
Yeah.
catfishing other men,
Oh my
um,
goodness.
and understanding how to do that. So, anyways, okay,
Yeah. I wonder, while you were talking about that, I was thinking about, have you ever seen like Chris Hansen? And d-
no,
but oh my gosh. Okay. So they're like back in like the early 2000s, Chris Hansen, he's like a TV reporter, and he worked with this group who would essentially catfish pedophiles and
mm,
convince them to think that they were young children, and they would like lure them to this like fake house, and the cops would like bust these guys.
yeah, yeah,
um,
I've seen some of these. I didn't know
yeah,
what his name was,
yeah,
but
yeah,
he would get them to confess on videotape to what they were doing, and then he'd turn that into the police.
yeah.
Um, and a lot of the guys that he caught seemed very sort of psychologically immature people, like very like not fully like kind of like, I don't know if you remember the episode where Dr. Cummings talked about pedophilia, but they're like very psychologically immature people.
Mm,
So yeah, very interesting.
yeah,
A positive use of catfishing.
yeah.
Um, yeah, try if and I imagine he could potentially get in trouble too if it turned out wrong. I don't know. But
Yeah.
okay, so online romance scams can be these kind of parasocial relationships. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So parasocial relationships are one-sided relationships. It could be like where somebody's really interested in a certain celebrity, and the person who's not a celebrity knows what they think is everything about this person. They know like where they grew up, and they know like how many movies they've done, but the celebrity doesn't know anything about the other person's existence, of course. Um, and so in this type of online romance scam, the scammer, who's often a female, posts nude pictures, videos of herself, maybe on a website called OnlyFans. And the victim, often a male, has to pay money to view these pictures and videos, usually in the form of a monthly subscription. And the victims also pay money. Well, I'm not sure if it's really victimization, but more on that later. The purchaser, let's say, that can also pay money to send messages to the OnlyFan account woman, which is either ignored or sometimes responded to with like an automatic message that seems like it's possibly like personalized. Anyway, the reason I say that I'm not actually sure if this is a scam is like I'm kind of on the fence here. Like in some ways it's sometimes seen as a form of like female empowerment, and like being able to, like, there's arguments that like women are able to like use like their creativity and like their features in order to make money. And women make a lot of money from OnlyFans. It's unbelievable. And it kind of seems like, I mean, the men know what they're getting themselves into in this case too, for the most part. So I'm not exactly sure what to make of this. What do you think?
Well, I think it's playing on like it's kind of like the next generation of porn or the
Yeah.
democratization of porn, where you have um, the the ability for people to go out sort of on their own and not have a ton of people in between making all the money off of porn. So
Yeah.
for the men, you know, I think they get pulled into these types of dynamics because they're wanting something more real than porn. It's more interactive than porn. And they can kind of have
Mhm.
this fantasy that gets played out over time. But yeah, I think it is kind of a one-sided relationship because, you know, you are thinking a lot more about this person, this, and then they are thinking about you.
Yeah.
And in the end, what they want is money. And in the end, what you want is sex or to fulfill some sort of like sexual desire, to stroke some, you know, sexual need. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm more curious about it than anything else.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so how to identify a online romance scammer?
Yes. There are quite a few websites that are made to help people understand how to identify a scammer. And so I pulled some information from fightcybercrime.org and advocatingforyou.com, which is like advocating against romance scammers. And they essentially, it boils down to 5 points. And so, are you being scammed by your online lover? So first you would ask yourself, does it seem too good to be true? And for example, like maybe like this very attractive person messaged you first, and their profile might not align with what they've told you. Number two would be love bombing. So, like we said earlier, professing their love after a short time, using terms of endearment. And yeah, with that, like rarely using the victim's actual name, um, possibly because, the catfish is scamming so many other people that they don't want to slip up and accidentally use the wrong name. So they just call everybody sweetheart or love. Or I've also seen people like say, like, oh, you're my wife, which is a little unnerving if someone were to call me that after me never having met them in real life. But okay. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
let's
keep
take a
going.
pause there. What do you think of those two?
Um, yeah, I think they're sort of meeting some psychological need there of people's hopes and desires. And it can be, I'm thinking of my patients who have gone through this. It can be really hard to break them out of this. Like you, as the therapist, as the psychiatrist, if you hear this, you may immediately think this is a scam of some sort.
Yeah.
But this person can be very emotionally invested in this relationship. I remember one patient in particular in resident clinic that there was like his phone would go off multiple times during the session by this scammer sending him messages,
Mhm.
and it took about like he was going to leave his wife for this scam. He had never met this
Oh my
person.
gosh.
She called him honey, and I think she like he was waiting for her to get her green card, and I think he had already sent her some money. And I'm not going to give too many of the details, obviously, but
Yeah.
I think this is kind of a common experience. And then, you know, how do you help someone like that? I think what we did was we tried to empathize with his desire and yearnings and loneliness in his current relationship while pointing out bluntly, like, I'm not going to not stand by and allow someone to fall into a scam, that there
Yeah.
were some things there that concerned me. and that he should do, that this is probably not a real person.
Right.
And, it's interesting, like, if you say that so bluntly to someone, they may leave you as their therapist. Like, they may choose that scam over you, their therapist. So it's a
Yeah.
delicate
It's
tightrope to
almost
walk.
like treating it as if it's a delusion, and like not like neither like confirming nor denying it maybe, and like but it's so hard because you clearly know that it's not real,
I
and
think
it's hurting them.
I think that you could, and potentially from building this episode, I'm going to be sharing this episode with my clients who I think might be in an online scam. It's kind of like there's certain telltale signs, right? Sending gift cards is like no real person I've never heard of any dating interaction where they ask you to send gift cards.
Me neither.
Or yeah, so I think that there's a lot of these signs that, like, once you I would empathize strongly with their yearnings for connection, their desires for connection, or even their love that they feel towards this person. But I think for something like this, it's worth being a little bit more blunt, that
Mm,
there are some very strong signs that this is a scam. There was one person that I was seeing early on, and it was in my cash pay practice, and I felt
mhm.
bad. This person wanted to see me for therapy. I didn't think they could afford me, and so I referred them to someone else, and then so I would see them intermittently, like every 3 months, and it came out that this person had lost like a lot of money. And I wonder, like, man, if I would have seen this person weekly and just like would I have been able to catch this sooner and saved them like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh my gosh.
So sometimes as a provider, like, you may not even know that this is going on. And so you may need to ask questions to sort of solicit, like, oh, are you in any relationships, online relationships? Have you met the person?
Mm.
And just be blunt with the question, like, has the person ever asked for money?
What type of like, oh, you wouldn't ask this
Tell
to
me
like
the
every
story.
single patient, but like what type of patient would you ask that to?
I ask every single patient, are they in a relationship? Are they
But would
dating?
you like with everybody, would you go deeper and be like, is it online? Do you know them?
Um, I don't know. I don't say that I can't say that I have said that, but I
Okay.
think that it could be like, if they're like, yeah, I've been dating someone for like 3 years, then sometimes it just comes out, you know,
Yeah.
that, like, as you're hearing more about the relationship, the sort of red flags go up. So
Hmm.
asking for money, asking them to set up a bank account, asking them to set up a crypto account to send crypto money,
Hmm.
and for there's often good reasons to need the money, like, oh, I have this business, we're short this much money. If I can get this much money, I can unlock 10 times as much money and instantly pay it back, stuff like that, where it's like, oh, I really want to help this person out that I care about for a long time.
Right.
All right, let's talk about the personality traits of perpetrators of online romance scams.
Sure.
So what are the things that they found in previous studies?
They found that the perpetrators have low agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness. One study found that only low conscientiousness was a significant predictor of catfish perpetration. Um, it suggested that narcissism may be at play.
And sort of people high in impression management. Yeah, so just to remind people what low conscientiousness means, because that seems to be a pretty common finding here, is it's a domain of the big five personality type. And people who are high in conscientiousness are high in, like, achievement striving, orderliness. People lower in conscientiousness tend to be the opposite. So they're, not orderly, low responsibility, low planning, not as industrious. And so you can imagine like the perpetrators are low conscientiousness. They're not usually highly organized or driven people. So that's a common thread.
Mm.
Study was interesting this fall 2010, talking about
Yes.
what things are lied about.
Yes, very interesting. So they found that men are more likely to misrepresent personal assets, relationship goals, personal interests, and personal attributes, whereas women were more likely to represent their weight. What do you make of that?
I think it tends it's something that's like a common thread of like just base attractiveness is sometimes financial assets for men, looks for women.
Mhm.
And so, even in these like TikTok catfish videos where the women are putting on excessive makeup, and then the TikTok sort of catfish for men is more like appearing to have more money and, lying about your height. And I have one story. I'm trying to like remove enough detail so I can tell it. But basically, a couple years into a relationship, a girl found out that the guy was not as wealthy as he said he was,
Mhm.
like orders of magnitude lower. And it was devastating because it was like a lie, but then she was also like so deep in the relationship. But I think the attractiveness was like you look at like 50 Shades of Grey, or like these kind of like the archetypal sort of the billionaire mystery man, like
Yeah.
attractive, like like this is kind of like that like archetype that can be seductive but catfished. Go ahead. What do you think?
I think in some ways, like maybe this is just a hypothesis,
Okay.
but it seems like maybe men who are pretending to be very wealthy online or something like this, like or even in real life, if like it extends that far, but it seems like it's kind of like a cop out, so they don't have to be as attractive. They don't have to be as like interesting or funny or have like a spectacular personality because they're saying, "Oh yeah, I have all this money." So it kind of allows them to not be great in other areas.
Hmm. It's kind of blinding. It can be blinding of sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and this is like, why do guys drive Lamborghinis or like, sports cars? It's like, I think that there's this world of, that can be attractive. Yeah, it's interesting. I think, so girls can be catfished to maybe some of the things like that, where guys can be catfished to, you know, some of these filters or other things that can make them imagine they're dating someone they're not.
Yeah.
But I think it goes into this thing of like, um, your ideal that you're dating is not the real person. Which when you find out that this person that you're dating or now having attachment with is not the person that you imagined, that can be very distressing. Very
Yeah.
distressing.
So then you like wonder what else are they lying about? And yeah. It almost probably feels like a loss, like when it comes out that it's not this person.
Okay, this next part, we're talking about how scammers might use artificial intelligence for online
Yeah.
romance scams. The basic idea is that this will probably increase, and as AI gets more sophisticated, just imagine them, just imagine you you may be in a relationship with someone that's really just an AI bot. And so I think that the chance that online romance scams increase is pretty high.
Yeah. Especially with AI getting smarter and smarter.
Personality traits of victims of online romance scams. So what did you find there?
So the victims of fraud are most likely to be cooperative, greedy, gullible or uncritical, careless, susceptible to flattery, easily intimidated, risk takers, generous, hold respect for authority, and are overall good citizens. And yeah, that is according to the authors of a chapter titled Personal Fraud, the Victims and the Scams.
Interesting.
And then a 2013 study investigated the differences between people who did and did not report past compliance with scams. The study found that the principal differences were in the response to very high value incentives, in the extent to which they reacted with positive emotions to the thought of winning a large prize.
Mm.
And also in their reliance on signs of like official authority and within their self-confidence.
So like we were saying, like if you feel like you've won the jackpot with dating this person, it's like, oh wow. Then it's like maybe you might take more risks or do things that you normally wouldn't do.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about how to help people who are catfishers.
Yeah. I think like we discussed earlier, exploring like their loneliness or what this catfisher is fulfilling for them um is helpful. But yeah, when the study from August 2022 suggested that clinical approaches that facilitate deconstruction, such as narrative therapy, or exception seeking, such as solution focused brief therapy, could be helpful to improve beliefs um, of mate value.
So this is actually like focusing on the person that's catfishing. They're like creating the false identities.
Yeah, yeah. So like they discussed ways to help like people who are catfishing and help people who are getting catfished.
And I think the catfishers here that they're trying to target are the ones that are more lonely, isolated, maybe not seeking true relationships, but kind of creating these fantasies in order to engender connection. Although they have to kind of like fake some part of themselves, and so trying to get them to come to a place where they can have real relationships is key. I think when we're thinking about more nefarious characters that might be catfishing for just pure money motives and maybe they're higher in psychopathy, those people are not going to respond to therapy. So, you know, as a clinician, you have to kind of like assess who you're talking to. And I imagine someone who's high in psychopathy is not really going to want therapy either
Yeah.
because it's not about the attachments, it's about the money. So, yeah. Okay. How do you help victims who have fallen into online romance scams? And we'll finish with this.
Yeah. So kind of similarly, you want to increase attachment security. It may help to reduce tendency to alleviate anxiety and and really just helping their self-confidence so that they feel better about themselves and are able to be more discerning with people in general.
Yeah. So it's about how to help them connect in healthy ways with real people. How to build friendships and real relationships if they're struggling with that. I mean, some of the people that I've seen who are prone to these scams like have zero friendships, zero like that are deep, and so it's like helping them find real relationships and real, you know. And I sometimes I take more of a coaching stance there and like, okay, if you're a young guy and you have like you're just playing video games in isolation all day, it's like, okay, how do I get you to stop doing that and do things with other people where you can build real friendships? So yeah, and then you know, pulling truth into their eyes in a way that they can move through it and just realize it's going to be an attachment loss to lose that relationship, even though it's not a real relationship, because they've idealized and often fallen in love with this fake person
Yeah.
and sometimes given money. So it's like it's hard for them to not believe it after they've given money because they're invested financially in something. It's hard for them to see reality. So you as the guide, helping them through that.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there just for the sake of time. Annabel, thank you so much for coming on, and you did some amazing research. If you want to see these research studies, there's about 10 of them. They will be on our website, psychiatrypodcast.com, in the resource library. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will leave it there.
Thank you.